Gainesville Sports Organizing Committee, the Florida Track Club, and the people from the University of Florida, coaches, and the former athletes and great friends of track and field throughout the area. We have a lot to be very proud of, and I get to look back on that now, but what we want to do is look forward to the wonderful opportunity the University of Florida has and support that and get to know more people involved in our sport. So we're going to give a little bit of history. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about these different individuals because we got some phenomenal people around. But one of the first things we did was to create the Florida Track Club along with running the University of Florida in 1965. And that's because a young man named Frank Sayer and another young man named Frank Ligotti transferred into run for us here in Florida. And we put a little TC on their shirt and it became the Florida Track Club. And it's been going on for quite a while. So to tell you a bit about that, on the first two people, Frank Sayer and Frank Ligotti is somewhere. Frank, you're
yes,
on.
Frank.
Frank Ligotti, you come on over.
That's great.
I would tell you what they did not do, but I'll you're older. You
Well, I had gone to the United States Military Academy at West Point and realized after 20 minutes this wasn't for me. It took me 20 months to get up the nerve to tell my father I was going someplace else. But during my time there, I had a cartilage operation. In those days, it took out the entire cartilage. And so I was kind of a broken down runner who showed up on Jimmy's door one day out of the clear blue and said, "I'm transferring in, I'd like to run." And I explained that I had this cartilage operation and I wasn't sure how I would do, but he took a chance on me. And the rest is history, and I'll forever be in his debt for giving me that opportunity. Thank you.
I'm going to bring you back because you need to talk a little about, the track club and how you guys started running, how you picked your sites and how you picked your trails and stuff, because that's a lot of these people, these younger people, are now using the trails that you guys sort of broke into back in 1965. Well, I was recruited out of high school by Jimmy. He came down and watched a track meet. He actually came primarily to see a teammate of mine. The teammate signed at Florida. So Jimmy said, "Well, while I'm here, how'd you like to come up and look at Furman?" I was a pretty good high jumper in high school, not great. So I went up and looked at Furman, and I liked it because I wanted to be a big fish in a little pond instead of vice versa. And Jimmy said, "Well, I only have a half scholarship for you, but I'll get you another half from the basketball team. But you gotta sort of try out." So believe it or not, the first day I get to Furman, they check my shoe size and stuff, and they put me in shoes, and I go down, and suddenly there's 9 guys down there waiting to scrimmage with me. Well, we scrimmaged for a while, and Jimmy came up to me later and said, "You did good. You got another half scholarship now." So anyway, I go to Furman. I'm not particularly happy there. It wasn't as bad as West Point, but it was only 2,500 kids, and it was too small for me. In the meantime, right after having as my coach for 3 months, he leaves the school and comes to the University of Florida. So I ran into him in Louisville the following year, and he said, "Well, how are things going?" I said, "I'm not particularly happy at Furman." And he said, "Well, how'd you like to come down at Florida?" Well, we talked about it, and I knew that I wasn't going to be eligible if I came down. He said, "Well, we'll figure something for you to do." So again, I got a partial scholarship, and I told him, yes, I come down and meet up with Frank, who came in from the same way, and then also I think John Morton came about the same time. All of us were unhappy in the schools we were in. John was a shot putter, discus guy. I was a high jumper. Frank was a miler, and we were, some of the best guys on the team, frankly, but we're not eligible. So Jimmy says, "Well, we need to put that to work." So he gets a shirt designed with a big orange in the middle of it, and he tells us to start training. And he gets us into these meets, various meets where you have open divisions at the time. And what is the name of it? Well, he said, "Call it Florida Track Club." Frank starts running with kids out of the neighborhood, and he's got guys that are eligible, ineligible. It didn't matter. They just started training together. And so he was ineligible the next year. I was as well. We just go to these meets. Went to about 6 or 7 meets, I think. And then the following year, we just jumped right into the track team. And that's how the Florida Track got started, because we did pretty well. Those shirts showed up really well, and people would come up to Jimmy and say, "What the heck is that?" And Jimmy said, "You're currently enrolled in Wisconsin, and you're running and it's minus 28 degrees. Did you ever think of coming down where the coldest it is in Gainesville is 70? And he didn't have much trouble recruiting that way. And so suddenly the next year the Florida Track Club gets larger, and then the next year it got larger again, and that's sort of how things got started. I never set any trails because I was a high jumper, so of course I just had to practice jumping. Frank would be out at 6 in the morning, and he would be running for an hour and a half and 2 hours before school, and then 2.5 hours during school, and then 2.5 hours at night, and all this stuff. So they were all over this county, and they'd see this track club thing, and boy, it really caused some interest. And it was great times back then. Jimmy is to be congratulated even today for getting the interest started, and I hope that we can use this tonight as an occasion to get the community back involved with the track program out there, because we used to go to barbecues and all sorts of things which are probably illegal today, but it was a lot of fun back then, a lot of fun. And that's all I got to say.
Let me tell you, Frank, you said you were indebted for me allowing you to run. I'm indebted for you running 4:05 in the mile. And the record when I got here was 4:16. So that was, and for Frank, high jumping 7 feet for the first person in the South to ever clear that height. And boy, did we have fun with that. We made that thing like it was the biggest thing ever happened in the world, and it was. Well, while we're here with the University of Florida track team going and the track club going, there was other things that were a wonderful opportunity to do, and one of them was called a Junior Champ track program that I had seen at Greenville, South Carolina at Furman. And my dear friend Perry McGriff, I pulled him over and said, we need to do this with the JCs, and that happened. And that was one of the wonderful things that created a wonderful atmosphere of track and field here in this area. And then one day I pulled him over again and I said, Harry, we need a sports organizing committee. So Perry McGriff, come up and tell us about it.
Well, all of you that have been around Jimmy knows that his brain is always going. In our story, I was coming back from a State Farm meeting out in a study group in Colorado, and I flew into Atlanta, and who do I meet in Atlanta but Jimmy Carnes? And he had been in, I think, in Indianapolis, where they had started their sports commission up there, and Jimmy, I don't know where all he had been, and we meet in the Eastern Airlines ionosphere, which doesn't exist anymore. And Jimmy starts sharing with me, we need to do a sports organizing committee here in Gainesville. And you know what he does, he basically talks to you, tells you what he wants.